Hi everyone, welcome to this session with us. Very excited to have you here. And with me in the room, I'm Aaniyah Martin-Omardien. I've just recently changed my name. I'm still getting used to it. And I am the founder and director of the Beach Co-op, a nonprofit organization based here in Cape Town. But what we do is way more than cleaning beaches. We're very much interested in building communities that care for and with our marine environment. And I'm here today to have a conversation with both Dylan McGarry and Cleo Droomer. And I'm very excited for our conversation and what we'll be sharing with you. So just by brief introduction, Dylan is an activist, educational sociologist, and multimedia artist from Durban, South Africa. And Cleo is a multi-award-winning textile artist and designer from Cape Town, South Africa. But they're both currently sitting in Makanda, and they're very much part of the arts festival that's happening there now, currently. But we'll share more about all of that. And while we were chatting, just warming up and getting ready to get you all into the room, we were talking about our grandparents and their influence on the work that we do today in their different ways and what that means for us. So my gran was a dressmaker and made beautiful garments. She actually made my wedding dress too, but she was well known in the Cape for making wedding dresses, and she was particularly grateful or thankful for the fact that she made them and what she termed those people as European people. So it was, very affluent people, and mainly white women that she made these beautiful wedding dresses for, and she was really proud of that. So I shared that with Cleo, and his gran was also really well known for the same trait. So let's start sharing there, Cleo and Dylan. How did your grandparents influence you and the work that you do today?
Well, firstly, thank you, Anya, and thank you for having us both here. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. I think this is such an important platform to have these conversations and hold space like this for conversations like this to happen. Dylan and I met 2 years ago, and subsequent to our meeting have become life partners in everything, I guess. And we always say that our ancestors are kind of leading the work that we do. They are the main informants of where we're going. And it's such a wonderful thing to know that the genesis of our relationship and dynamic has been through our grandmothers. And when both our grandmothers actually passed away in the same month.
Yeah, just before lockdown, they died in the same month, and we just started chatting online and talking and sharing through Instagram, and we ended up helping each other through the grief of losing our grandmothers, who played such a big role in our lives. And at the time, I was actually making a grief quilt, which is this quilt. And then when we finally met, Cleo turned it into one of his dream coats for me. So they've been very present, and they both taught us to sew and to mend. And yeah, that knowledge was really passed down to us by our grandmothers.
I remember when we moved into our in 94, we moved into the northern suburbs of Cape Town. And so we had to let go of a whole bunch of the old stuff from Paul, where I grew up, and my grandparents' stuff, and a whole bunch of old things. And I remember so clearly my father selling my grandmother's old Singer machine, those old machines that are on the table and you still wind it with the hand. And I remember him selling that machine, I think for like 500-600 rand or something, and me being devastated because how can you sell something that's so important in making and creating? And I remember at the age of like 5 or 6, this very vivid memory of like this machine being taken away from me. But there was this box of haberdashery that stayed behind, and it was full of knitting needles. And I think my dad thought he couldn't probably sell that, so let's just hold on to it or give it to someone. But I took this basket for myself, and I started playing, and that's where my first interest around like textile and kind of making things with textile kind of started. It really was thanks to my grandmother's haberdashery box that kind of got things going for me.
Sure, that is so beautiful. You also mentioned your grandfather's role in this. Can you share with us?
Yeah, so my grandfather, his name was Clyde. He was a very formidable man. I think all grandkids have a very special, or most grandkids have a very special connection to their grandparents, and it wasn't any different with my grandparents. They filled all those gaps that you wanted your parents to have, and that love language of gifting and just being there was always present with your grandparents. And it was so amazing with my grandfather that we had this wonderful connection where he was just spoiling us and wanting us to do all these extracurricular things, which he would kind of make sure that we did. And he made sure that I did piano and pursued all the extra things that I wanted to do, all my little interests that I loved. He would like fund that off his little pensioner's pension every month. But he was just so present for all my wants in life. And I'm so grateful for that, because he held such an important space for me to like explore my creativity. And I think as a growing up in a very conservative brown family, I don't think many kids back then were gifted the opportunity to kind of like express themselves a lot. And I'm so grateful to my grandfather for like allowing that for me, which was such a beautiful share in masculinity, I think, because thinking back to like 80s, 90s, we were still very much stuck in a very patriarchal, masculine, we've got a very certain dynamic between a father and a son. And we just had such a warm, convivial relationship, which I'm so grateful for. And I think that was very pivotal in me also exploring my creativity.
Beautiful. I love that. As I said earlier, I recently changed my name back to Aaniyah Martin. And then at that time, or I think around about that time, my mom found this bag of mine, which I stitched at school.
That's so cool.
So this is, the embroidery. My gran was really good at embroidery as well. And there are various techniques that she taught me. So this is something I made at school. So this is my original grasshopper school bag, guys.
So cool.
I just had to throw that in and share there. But Dylan, your background has been science. And yet you've always, or at least for as long as I've known you, drawn on art and design as an important medium and layer to your work as a scientist. So I'd like you to share more about how you've gone on that journey and created that and woven the thread between science and art, and how have you found that journey?
Yes, thanks, Anya. I feel like I've always been an artist and then like dabbled in science, and because I went to university on an art scholarship and studied art, but then really wanted to respond to the crisis, of the climate crisis, the biological crisis. But the more I started working in South African context, I realized that this was actually a social crisis and a cultural crisis. Of various issues, from like white supremacy to just the legacies of apartheid and poverty and epistemicide, like the death of cultures. And so my work got more politicized, I suppose, and art has always been a way for me to have to explore another kind of research. I think scientists often see artists as people to communicate their science. And I never wanted to be that person. I wanted to use art as a form of research and a form of uncovering and understanding the world in a more embodied and emotional way. And so right from the beginning, I had amazing supervisors who just let me work, even in the science field with kind of arts-based practice, and then went actually into this field of education, because there you don't really have to hold on to a particular discipline. And I heard Joanna Macy recently in an interview saying that, art and science are like two rivers that have always been flowing closely and intertwining with each other in human consciousness. And it's only in the recent past that they were pulled apart, like spirituality. And she was saying spirituality and science. And we're in this kind of crux moment where the two rivers are starting to meet again. And I think the more we have conversations between those two worlds, and the more that we're able to use art, and in this case and in this context, mending practices, both the actual physical practice of mending and the figurative, symbolic practice of mending, it could help us decolonize science and really come to a point of building new regenerative science.
Wow, that is just so beautiful. That totally resonates with me, because I also studied sciences, my undergrad and for my master's. But even with my master's, I started blurring and becoming more of a social scientist, I suppose, because that's what I've always been more drawn to. But I see the strength in the two working alongside each other, as you say, and really the opportunity there for decolonization through that process. Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. So Cleo, coming back to you, and if you could share with us some more of what you're currently working on. I know there's quite a lineup. I'm very excited to see and experience and touch and feel and smell all of it. So if you could share, I know about the dream coats, but I know that there's more than just the dream coats. So tell us some more. Tell us some more. Share with us.
It's unfolding something new every single day, and there's like layers and layers to this work the more I delve into it. But maybe we can share some images and you can get a better idea. So let's maybe just start there. So okay, let's maybe just start with how this whole thing kind of came about. I've been in the corporate fashion game for just over 12 years, I think, in and out, doing some freelance work and doing some runway shows and being an independent designer, and like having many hats on within the past like scope of my career in fashion. And I think beginning of last year, also during the pandemic, when everyone was like super introspective and like asking all these existential questions, I really had like a come to self moment where I was like, what am I really doing? How sustainable is this if I'm harping on about sustainability in the job that I'm doing? And I'm saying I'm wanting to do more sustainable practices, but I'm feeding into this machine that I don't really think is kind of hearing me or seeing me or like heeding anything that's kind of happening outside in the world. Like how am I really changing anything? And at that point in my life, I was really wanting to just be an agent of change in some form. And I really started asking questions around like, how can I be the best version of myself and be a catalyst for something bigger to happen? And that's when I started thinking about Droomer in quite a serious way, and started thinking that what are the regenerative practices and storytelling practices that I can bring into this work that kind of become a a love letter to my ancestors and to rethinking what fashion can be and what making garments can look like, and also finding an intersection between art, storytelling, and fashion in one medium. So that's how Droomer came about. I took a step away from the corporate machine last year in April, and I just gave myself a little bit of space to start creating and start playing around and start thinking about how does this brand start telling the story of me, and also my country and my existence in this country. And that's how Droomer kind of started.
Jumped a bit.
Yeah, you don't have to go through that. So the first couple of garments I started making were these jackets where I just started using a whole bunch of scrap fabrics and things.
These are
these are
my old
made out of
trousers.
Dylan's trousers, but it's so funny. When I started making this, I realized that I'd never thrown away a single scrap of fabric since I started studying. So since 2007, when I started, I had like black bags and black bags and black bags full of scraps of like things when I did like wedding dresses and lingerie and corseting and things during my studies. I have all of that stuff still. And I was like, the biggest problem that designers face in South Africa is fabric and getting decent fabrics. And I was like, let's just make a new textile. I can make something completely new. I don't want to throw all this stuff away. There's some beautiful things. So I started like piecing together things. When I came to visit Dil in Makanda, he had like, I'm very Virgo, so I went through his cupboard and I was like organizing things, and I was like, you're chucking these away. And there were these 5 pants, and I was like, let's cut these pants up and make a jacket. And so in this beautiful process of like deconstructing my lover's trousers, I started making this new textile that was woven into this new beautiful jacket. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for me, because that was like, wow, okay, this is such a beautiful ritual. You know, I'm taking something old from someone that I love and piecing it back together into this brand new item that's got so much memory in it, you know? And just doing that practice was such a beautiful ritual for me. And it just kept memory alive. I felt like in this new garment, it's filled with all these memories of the past. And that's how the Protect Me Colored Dreamcoats kind of started, with that, with Dil's jackets. But as we go on to the next one.
Yeah, this is tell me.
Yeah. You know, I think our biggest work, not just as artists, as people, is to, I think for most people, is to just kind of piece together this, like, what it means to be here, what it means to be a living ancestor of those that come before us, what it means to be a global citizen, what it means to be a citizen of South Africa. I think these are questions that we're constantly asking ourselves, and I think more so now as we're moving into these very uncertain times. They're just these very important questions. And for me, growing up as a brown queer kid in South Africa, it's been very difficult to answer these questions for myself. I've always had them since I was young. I was thinking, like, how do I fit into this whole bigger picture of things? Like, what is my purpose here? What am I doing? And I never ever thought that my work and these existential questions, I guess, could kind of marry into one medium of art. Let's hold on those.
Okay.
But as I started like piecing together all these scrap fragments of my life, you know, there came a day when I just started laying stuff out all over the table, and I started just like piecing and putting things together and putting color palettes together and thinking, you know, these tell a beautiful story, these tell a beautiful story. the ritual behind it, the ritual behind piecing together and taking old and creating new and mending and layering and splicing and deconstructing, I found such magic and power in that process of like piecing apart things to like piece together something new. And metaphorically, this became like a practice for kind of understanding my life and
your histories.
And my histories, yeah. And as kind of cliche as it sounds, like you're kind of understanding yourself through like putting these pieces together. So that's kind of, I guess, like surface level, what the piecing together means to me. So that's kind of one part of it. But then on the other side, in the back of my head, is this whole heritage conversation around like, I'm here as a brown South African. I'm like this patchwork mix masala of a whole bunch of influences from all over the world. I've always been so deeply interested in my history and where I'm, where my origins are from. And I think it's even that little bit more interesting when you don't have the information. As brown people, there's not a lot of documentation, or late 1800s, a lot of our ancestors never got the chance to have pictures taken. I've got a lot of pictures from the white side of my family, but from the so-called colored side of my family, there aren't many records. So it intrigues you, and you start asking more questions around who were these people and how did they live their lives? What did they do? And so that also spurred me on this whole new chapter of like trying to piece together my history and what it means to be a brown South African. And so I use these coats as a kind of catalyst to like piece together that process of like understanding my history and my ancestry as well. So that's where the Protect Me Colored Dream coats come from. And it's called Protect Me Colored Dream coats because my great-great-great-grandfather, his name is Joseph Droomer, got the surname Droomer because they thought of him as Joseph the Dreamer from the Bible. He never had a different surname, but they started calling him Droomer in the Netherlands. And so yeah, that's kind of likening it to Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I thought, what is my Protect Me Color Dreamcoat? And that's how these kind of names came about. Let's go into the life jackets.
Yeah, and then these life jackets are part of a collection that's currently now on at the National Arts Festival. So maybe I'll just give a bit of context of where they're sitting in. They're falling within a wider exhibition called Our Ocean is Sacred, You Can't Mine Heaven. And it's a collaboration of different artists. And there are at least 3 textile-based pieces in the exhibition that are really trying to explore the ocean space and how it's being colonized by capitalism and by the kind of push for oil and gas. And Cleo's added these 3 beautiful pieces into them, these life jackets. Do you want to talk about those?
So basically, these life jackets came about to kind of pose the question to, I guess, the world at large, but I guess in the right to be to UNESCO and to all these ocean agencies. Can the ocean be regarded as a sacred heritage site? We've got Auschwitz and the
killing fields
in Cambodia, who are all declared, World Heritage Sites due to the mass genocides that happened at these places. But I think we failed to forget, to remember that the ocean carries over 12.5 million bodies of enslaved peoples from all over the world. And these people lost their lives at sea from the 1600s to the 1800s. And all these bodies are kind of left at the bottom of the ocean, and these life jackets are kind of a call to ask, like, can this ocean, which we all already feel is very sacred, can it be seen as a heritage site, and can it be respected for the mass genocide that's happened over 300 years on the waves? But these life jackets kind of bring it back to the context of me and my personal heritage projects. Have been a piecing together of heirloom fabrics. So this one that we're looking at right now is a whole bunch of my grandfather's old ties that I've pieced together. And I've made this very intricate mosaic patchwork of his old beautiful ties into this protection device, this life-saving flotation device. And then the one before, which is called A Jacket for Ma. This is my Ma's old fabrics, a whole bunch of old fabrics. It's an old belt, I think, of my father's. So I've pieced all these kind of ancestral pieces into this jacket that is helping us to remember that this horrific incident happened, but you know, we're still here today to tell the story of it. And then the last one is, it's called De-Assimilation, and it's kind of just a play on camouflage, on the military complex, kind of fitting in and using camouflage to kind of disguise yourself and kind of not be seen. And this is kind of piecing apart and deconstructing that and putting it together into something that is, I think, aesthetically new and interesting to look at, but it has that kind of hint to having to once try to fit in, but not anymore. And that leads me to my next work, which is my De-Assimilation cloak. And this was a cloak that kind of, I made this a while ago, but it's fed into so much of the other work that I've been doing now, where I kind of took this idea of camouflage and I took it apart and I was like, what does it mean to actually fit into a space? Why have we been trying to fit into spaces for so long? And I've spent my whole life trying to fit into every kind of space all over, trying to change my the way that I talk, I guess, rolling my R's, trying to sound more white, trying to appease people. And, you know, saying it out loud now just sounds so ridiculous that you've lived your life like this. And this coat, piecing this together, just having that in the back of my mind, thinking I'm putting this thing together with that knowledge of like where I'm coming from, and then that I'm amending this thing to like kind of reimagine something new, has probably been one of the biggest, most important rituals for me to like kind of have this jacket that I've got here hanging in my studio. And every time I look at it, I'm like, yo, you're piecing together some big stuff for yourself. So this De-Assimilation work, has manifested itself into this deconstructed camouflage cloak, I guess, which means I'm not hiding anymore. So yeah,
and
that's
sorry Cleo, just to jump in there, but that you know, the word cloak as well, like the protection of it, you know, you've mentioned that the yeah, it almost feels, in some ways, I'm also working with the word container, and container can also be quite restrictive in some ways, but I'm trying to diffract that the common understanding we have of container. It can mean many things. There can be entrances and exits from many different places. It's a reclaiming of who we are. Such beautiful work. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to share that what you've just shared really resonates with me too.
Like an invisibility cloak. I just think of like, I don't know, Phantom of the Opera sort of thing, like you want to disguise yourself. And this cloak specifically, actually, it's got like two big buttons on it. And if you take those buttons out, you unbutton it, becomes this beautiful blanket or quilt, which can also be used in a completely different way. Like, I don't know, we're just like imagining while sleeping, taking it out to the beach and like lying on it and having it be this multi-purpose thing. And then it wraps up and becomes this protection device as well. It's just, yeah, interesting ways for me as well of thinking of clothing as being multifunctional.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Wow. I'm sure that there are lots of questions that we'll have. We need to make space for those questions at the end of our talk. Incredible work. Wow. So Dylan, I mean, you've shared some of what the National Arts Festival in Makanda is trying to achieve this year. Are there any other pieces you want to share that's been on display that relate to this topic of storytelling and archiving?
Yes, and I thought maybe we could just start with this idea that that mending has become for us, and I know for you as well. We've been in many conversations with your work with the hydro rug you're making. You know, we all three of us have been making social sculptures that are trying to, coming from Joseph Beuys' idea of trying to warm up the kind of cold spaces in our reality and in our society. And so even with your cloak, the fact that it becomes a blanket or a quilt, it figuratively can warm up a space, but it in many ways, I mean, physically and figuratively, it also offers us ways of thinking. And if you think we live in South Africa and in Africa, and most of our meaning making, like how Steve Biko put it, he said, we're always trying to understand the personality of a place, which is different to kind of the Western idea, which tries to objectify everything down to objects. In Africa, the tradition is always trying to get a sense of the personality of things. And I think for us, like as what we've been exploring in our conversations and in co-developing social sculptures, most of these things are like in constant conversation, that we're also seeing in Africa that most meaning making happens through idiom and idiomatic thinking and metaphor. And so the metaphors of mending can be quite useful. And if you go around our house, you'll find everything is mended in some form. These are my running shoes. You can find it all over. And alongside Cleo, I've been experimenting as well with just trying to understand practices different. This is Boro style mending from Japan, but we've been experimenting, Cleo and I, with these, but they're offering us kind of options of how do we create new archives. And this concept of an archive, like taking anarchy and archive, and not just the archive that the kind of colonial West has decided what gets archived, what histories get told and what histories don't. So at the festival this year, and we encourage everyone who's at the Wool Festival now to come and meet us at this one. We have an exhibition. They can't see it like on that. So this is a collective work of different works from artists from around the country. We have installations, we have film, we have photography, storytelling, immersive sound storytelling. Cleo's life jackets are there. And there's the kind of standout piece is this Crochet Coral Reef, which has been, I joined this team in 2009 at the beginning of my PhD with Maria Frangas and Leonie Hofmeyer, who started this reef with different citizens. It's a citizen science project across the country. And it's been being made over 12 years using the handicraft of crochet to co-construct and co-develop a coral reef that slowly bleaches. And it's kind of exploring this idea of coral bleaching. Sorry, I know the connection's quite static, so you're seeing it kind of moving statically. But Yeah, so this collection really is the new archive. And some of the artifacts in it were used as evidence in the recent court cases against Shell and Searcher for the oil and gas exploration along our coast. And we've really tried to capture that all into one exhibition because it was a landmark case where Judge Blum in the second court case really recognized the ocean as the ancestral realm for many Nguni descendant South Africans, which is the first time that's actually been kind of mentioned in a court case and used to justify, one of the reasons used to justify why we can't extract oil and gas from the sea. So you see in this exhibition a collaboration of textile artists. There's the Kaiskama tapestry that was made called Our Sacred Ocean, with working with elders, telling stories about their relationships to the sea. And then the International Library for African Music has gathered stories from their archive, but created new stories in a kind of an-archiving process. So you have these immersive, you can sit in these chairs and listen to these immersive stories of both in Xhosa and English, and then a variety of other pieces. So yeah, this is really exciting to see citizens from across the country coming together to kind of change ocean literacies to not just include marine science, but to include heritage and other forms of ways of knowing and being and embodying. So the Crochet Reef, for example, really embodies collectively through solidarity what is happening to our oceans with climate change and with the rush for oil and gas in our seas. Yeah, and it shows that you might start something small, which was started in 2009, a few people crocheting together. Now, when you go walk into the room, it's this incredibly huge, massive reef, 12 years later. So it's a real sign that you can, that those small actions actually have an impact. So that's about it for the exhibition. I don't know if you wanted to also talk about the sewing project.
Yeah, I think we can.
If there's time, how much time do we still have?
We've got about another 5 or so minutes just before I ask people if they have any questions that they would like to ask. I just like to say that both of the work that you've shared with us is just so beautiful because it's so relatable, it's so tangible, it tells a story. It's more than just the garment or just the art piece, and also it's so embodied, it's involved with our relationships to other bodies, and not only human bodies. So it's just fantastic work. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Please share if you can the sewing project. Before I have one more question just for Cleo that kind of speaks back to and talks back to the fashion industry. But yeah, Cleo, please share with us.
Yeah, so when did this happen? Last month?
Last few months, 2 months.
2 months ago, I joined the OneOcean Hub and Coastal Justice Network in their endeavors to kind of find alternative livelihoods for fisher folk along the Eastern Cape Coast who had been, due to COVID and many other circumstances, being left kind of destitute and without forms of income. And the question really was like, how do we get these people an income or an alternative livelihood other than trying to fish or try and get sustenance from the ocean. So they posed the question, we all posed the question to these women across the Eastern Cape Coast, and with a resounding yes, they all said they wanted to do a sewing project, and they thought that would be the best way for them to kind of gain sort of entrepreneurial skills and be able to be self-sustaining. So we all joined forces, and with the help of Coastal Justice Network, who was able to donate 20 sewing machines to these women, and WWF, who made a venue available for us, we kind of embarked on a sewing project, which was so much more than a sewing project. These women who had mostly been working, still currently are working as domestic workers to holiday makers in Hamburg and across the Eastern Cape. After 5 days of intensive basic sewing skills, had learned how to do patchwork and splicing and patching together and piecing together various pieces of cloth to kind of make something completely new. I kind of drove all around Makanda to find scraps of upholstery and things, and we had some shweshwe that was gifted to us as well. And I kind of put it to these women to say, like, you know, we've got these things, you're all designers and artists, and let's co-create this thing together. And the incredible beauty that came out of this process of kind of putting it to someone else to say that you are the creator of your own textile or your own garment or, you know, your own thing, and just the ingenuity and the creativity and the beautiful practice that came out of these like moments of piecing together pieces of fabric. And such an incredible moment came out during this practice was that, I mean, we had very limited, the communication was very limited because all these women were speaking isiXhosa and I was speaking English, so we were kind of teaching each other along the way.
You had a translator.
I had a translator, but you know, it's a very skills-based thing, so you've got to be hands-on when you want to talk and explain. So with a lot of signing and like miming, we got through some incredible stories, and these women started telling stories about, you know, they said, oh, makulu, our great-grandmothers, our grandmothers used to patch and patch together. And this is what the elders did, you know, but we don't do this anymore because it's like it's old hat. But started sort of surfacing these memories of their grandparents patching and how the beautiful quilts and blankets that they used to make. And it was such a beautiful moment. And at the end of these 5 days, these women held up these cushions and aprons and bags that they had made, and just the amount of pride that had come out from having made these wonderful textiles,
and
brand new
since
textiles.
then they've started their own cooperative and are producing their own work, and kind of we're trying to connect them to different markets at the moment. And yeah, they kind of way beyond, we're going back for more training sessions, but since then they've been making incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're really hoping to connect them, especially through this community as well. They're starting to make such beautiful textiles, and connect them with other designers and artists who want to work with them to make new work. So yeah.
Beautiful. So the patchwork and the weaving together isn't only in the material and in the, you know, making of, but also with the people and the connections and the networks out, you know, as it grows. It's beautiful. I love that. So we kind of got 10 more minutes, and I'd like to open the floor. But while you're thinking of your questions, if there are no burning questions, I have got one more in my back pocket for Cleo. Are there any burning questions? Please raise your hand or unmute yourself. We're a small enough room. So yeah. While you're thinking of a potential question, I can go ahead and ask Cleo about his experience of working in the fashion industry, and whether there's any hope. Do you think that there are enough big manufacturers who care, and will they change the narrative and idea of fashion for fashion's sake or fast fashion? What's your feeling?
You know, it's a tricky one to answer, because I've been there. I've been inside the belly of the beast, as you'd say. And I like sat on as a stakeholder for design sustainability councils and sessions on like what's best practice for sustainability going forward. And all the intention is there. I can speak from the couple of corporations that I've been in. All the intention is there. It's just always coming down to bottom line at the end of the day, profit margin and keeping stakeholders happy and that sort of thing. But the need and the want to do it is there. I think what's important is to kind of leverage conversations with people like ourselves who are kind of working on the fringe of it, in clothing and in art and in science and in kind of meaning making work, to just always be in conversation with these big corporations, because as much as they, I think, wanting to do it on their own, they need, I think, external hands and input to kind of get these things going. But there is the capability there. There's companies like, I mean, like H&M, for instance, is doing incredible work with like biodegradable fibers and like biomass sort of fabrics now, with these new American companies that are doing incredible stuff around innovation in textile. It's there. It's kind of like very in its infant stage at the moment now, but I think with more conversations and us like kind of trying to facilitate more open dialogue around this thing, I think there is definitely scope for change around it. I think we just need to keep on constantly pushing them. Like things with the Sopakama sewing project, there's such great opportunity for someone like a Pepco or like a Woolchu or someone to kind of join forces with them and say, you know what, let's see how we can leverage this resource and kind of be in
collaboration with them.
It's not really the word, it's be in collaboration, I
conversation, in I suppose, constantly holding each other accountable, you know, and trying to navigate through that.
And also practically, I mean, it could be, you know, setting up relationships with cooperatives like this. Why couldn't, you know, I know Woolworths has made the big call now to no longer use plastic bags, but they're still using kind of plastic fiber reusable bags. But what about using mended shopping bags made by the Sopakama Sewing Project, you know, giving orders per province to these different cooperatives around the country? We could be seeing really beautiful, you know, products emerging that are made from mended reused fabrics that would have a huge impact on the country, on the oceans, and on women's livelihood.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Something worth having a discussion with them about. Are there any are there any questions from the group, from the participants? Please feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. And otherwise, if there's anything more from either of you that you'd like to share, you know, related to what's come up in the conversation today, if there's anything more you want to say, please feel free to do so.
I'd love to say, I mean, so we started by just saying that, you know, Cleo and I met through the loss of our grandmothers, and then it was in the practice of mending and making each other clothes, that we kind of built a whole relationship, and our whole world has changed in ways we couldn't have even imagined coming out of the darkness of lockdown. And since then, our lives have just exploded in so many different ways. But mending practices and patchworking has played such an important role in like everything from how we are languaging our own experiences to how we are actually even like kind of living and making the world. So while sometimes it's mending fabric, sometimes it's trying to take what we're learning from this embodied practice of mending to like how we interact with relationships with our families, with our histories, And there is something quite interesting about wearing these like kind of archives on our bodies, because immediately people start asking us questions about them. And suddenly we're in these deep conversations with each other, and we're learning about other people's histories we wouldn't have learned about otherwise. And that's just been so exciting, and it's just exploding.
The jackets become such a catalyst for conversation. It's like when you're viewing an art piece in a gallery and you're asking someone, so what do you think about that? You're just in constant conversation with like...
And it's not rarefied.
Exactly. It's so accessible. That's what it is, because you're walking around with it. You're weaving as you walk, even, you know. That's so incredible. Wow. Thank you so much both for sharing and for opening up your hearts and your minds to us all here today. I don't see any hands from the audience, and we're pretty much on time. So thank you everyone for joining us, for listening in, and I look forward to seeing more of what you are creating and sharing with you.
Likewise.